September 1952, Bedouin of the Ta'amira tribe opened a hole in a mile cliff above the Dead Sea. Archaeologists followed. What came out of that hole K4 at Qumran was not a library in any recognizable sense. It was more than 16,000 fragments, scraps, some the size of a fingernail. Sorting them took decades, and among them were 7 manuscripts of a book that had been effectively lost to the West for 1,000 years, the Book of Enoch. Now, the Book of Enoch is a slightly misleading name because it is not one book. It is a collection of 5 originally separate works, bound together by tradition and by a single figure. The Book of the Watchers, chapters 1 to 36, the Parables, 37 to 71, the Astronomical Book, 72 to 82, the Dream Visions, 83 to 90, and the Epistle of Enoch, 91 to 105, with 3 short appendices after it. The Watchers is old. Nicolsburg and Vanderkam place it in the middle or late 3rd century before Christ. The Astronomical Book may be older still, they call it, carefully, possibly the oldest Enochic composition of them all. And this is the book the New Testament quotes. Jude, verses 14 and 15, quotes 1 Enoch 1 verse 9, and introduces it as prophecy. So, 7 copies from one cave of a book quoted in the Bible. Between them, in Aramaic, the language it was actually written in, they attest the Watchers, the Astronomical Book, the Dream Visions, the Epistle, 1 manuscript, 4Q 201, preserves the passage everyone knows. Chapters 6 through 8, the 200 Watchers, the Oath on Mount Hermon, a word of caution before we go further, because it matters later. These fragments are in terrible condition. The continuous Aramaic text you see printed in scholarly editions is heavily restored, filled in from the later Greek and Ethiopic. Lauren Stuckenbrook puts the limit bluntly. We cannot reconstruct an earliest version of 1 Enoch, not even for the passages where Aramaic survives. Hold on to that. It cuts both ways in a moment. Because here is the thing this episode is actually about. Of those 5 books, 4 turn up at Qumran. The Parables does not. Chapters 37 to 71. 35 chapters. Not one fragment has ever been identified among the scrolls. Not in Aramaic, not in Hebrew, not in any language. And before you assume that is just the luck of a damp cave, it is missing from the Greek as well. The Greek survives in patches. The IHAK Meme Codex, found in Egypt in the 1880s, carries chapters 1 to 32. A Chester Beatty papyrus carries 97 to 107. The Byzantine chronicler Syncellus quotes a few passages. Not one line of the parables appears in any of them. The complete text of the parables survives in exactly one language, Ge'ez, the liturgical language of the Ethiopian church. Older catalogues counted around 90 Ethiopic manuscripts of Enoch. Stuckenbrook and Erho now know of more than 150. The oldest is from the 15th century, possibly the 14th. So the earliest physical copy of these chapters is roughly 1400 years younger than the cave. And of all the sections to be missing, this is the one you would least want to lose, because the Parables is where Enoch is shown a figure. The text gives him 4 titles. The Chosen One, by far the commonest. The Righteous One, the Anointed One, just twice, at 48, 10, and 52, 4, and the Son of Man. He is seated on a throne of glory, and in chapter 62, he judges the kings and the mighty of the earth, who see him and are terrified, and are driven from his presence. If you have read the Gospels, you will recognize the furniture. And then, at the very end, chapter 71, verse 14, the Ethiopic manuscripts do something startling. God addresses Enoch directly and says, "You are that Son of Man." The manuscripts are not in doubt there. R. H. Charles found that reading so uncomfortable that in 1912 He amended it to, "This is the Son of Man." Van der Kam's verdict on that emendation is that it has no foundation in the manuscripts at all. What is argued over is not what the verse says. It is what the author meant, whether Enoch is being identified with the figure, or whether chapters 70 and 71 are a later addition, sitting awkwardly against the 30 chapters before them, where the Son of Man appears as somebody else entirely. Which brings us to 1976, and to Yusef Milik. Milik published the Cave 4 Enoch fragments 24 years after the cave was opened, and in that edition he drew a conclusion from the silence. The parables was not missing, he argued. It simply had not been written yet. He dated it to around the year 270 and called it a Christian composition. If that were true, it would settle a great deal. A Son of Man enthroned in glory, written 2 centuries after the Gospels, would tell you nothing about the world Jesus was preaching in. It would just be a Christian text wearing a Jewish costume. It did not last. In 1977, the Congress of Specialists on First Enoch met. Charlesworth's summary of that meeting is 1 sentence long. No one agreed with him. 2 years later, Michael Knibb published a critical review in New Testament Studies that took the argument apart in detail. And here I want to be precise, because this gets blurred constantly. Knibb demolished the Milik's 3rd century Christian thesis. He did not then endorse the early date. He argued for a later 1st century date himself. Rejecting Milik and joining the current majority are 2 different positions, and Knibb held only the first. The majority position now puts the parables around the turn of the era. Charlesworth argues for the reign of Herod the Great, 40 to 4 BC. Nicolsburg's range in the Hermaniah commentary is wider, 40 BC to 70 AD. A real minority still prefers the second half of the 1st century. The 3rd Enoch Seminar at Carmel d'Oecili in Italy in 2005 is where that consensus hardened, so the field moved. But notice what did not change. The manuscripts are still missing, and this is where I have to stop, because the honest answer is that nobody knows why. There are 3 live explanations. The first is that almost nothing survived at all. Charlesworth reckons less than 2% of what K4 may have held came back out of it, which means absence from Qumran was never strong evidence of anything. The second is that the parables was composed late enough that it had not yet circulated into that collection. The third is that the community knew the book and had no use for it, because a text that exalts Enoch this highly sits badly with people waiting on a Messiah from David and from Levi. I cannot tell you which of those is right, neither can anyone else. What I can tell you is that Milik's mistake is the one worth remembering. He looked at a gap in the evidence and read it as a fact about the text. That is a tempting move, and it is available to everybody, to the skeptic and to the believer equally. 35 chapters, no ancient copy, and a very old warning about what silence is worth.